Hi everyone, this is Anita from the pre-sales team here at Laserfiche, and today I'll be going over the accounts payable demo for LaserVM 10. And so this demo actually has two main parts. The first is creating a purchase order based off of employee requests. So there we're going to use forms to really streamline that process all the way from the beginning with the employee request to the end result, which is an actual purchase order that we can send out to our vendors. The second part of this demo is going to be about processing and paying invoices. And as you'll see, we have three main ways that you can configure this demo to show exactly what you need to show. So we'll talk about those different options when we get to the invoice processing half of this demo. Some things to keep in mind are that this demo really can be one entire long demo, or you can break apart the purchase order and the invoice pieces to just show what you need and not go through the entire thing. But today we'll walk through both of those halves and go over all your options for using accounts payable in LaserVM 10. I'm going to be using web access today, but it's also set up so that you can use the desktop client. And to kick off this purchase order process, which is what we'll be going over first, I'm going to actually navigate to the form URL, which I've saved already on my bookmarks bar. So the process does start out with our employee request, and it'll go from there. One thing to remember about these forms pieces is that all our user tasks for forms are going to be routed to username Laserfiche password L. So when you're looking for those user tasks that are coming in, they're actually going to show up in the same inbox so that you don't have to log in and log out as different users here for our actual forms tasks, and it will make it a little bit easier for you to show all the different parts and different tasks that are possibilities, but not have to move between the different usernames. And so I've gone ahead and filled out this purchase order request, but what you're seeing here is the first form that's going to kick off the entire process. And so make sure you carry on a story here. You can see that Andrew Hall and marketing are already filled out. And so when we start here, we're going to kick off the purchase order request process that goes to a manager and then to purchasing, and if that's approved, then finally to creating the purchase order itself. So we'll just go ahead and sign. And the next task that's going to come up is our manager approval. We can go back to the inbox. So a lot of these submission thank you pages now have links back to the inbox, so you can really move back and forth pretty easily. And just make sure you fill out this information for your manager so that it can continue to move down the path. Okay. We can approve it, and then it will continue on to purchasing. So for all of these tasks that are in our demo, we do have email notifications going out to the right parties. So when this shows up, we're going to see that there's an email to our manager for that task in form, so you can show email notifications if that's useful. And there's also a notification to the accounting team to review the request. So you can navigate to those tasks either in the forms inbox or by using email notifications. So here we're going to actually create the purchase order. And when you fill this out, just keep in mind that when we're filling out the requested items, it's going to calculate all of our totals for us. If you want to show the next step, which is CFO approval, the total will need to be over $5,000. So that's us escalating our purchase order request to the CFO if it is more expensive. So be sure to be aware of how much your items actually total up to if you do or do not want to show that step. We do have some required fields. And the supplier is going to do a lookup for some of the information here. And I'll just go ahead and fill out the rest of this form. With that filled out, I have all of these things calculated for me in forms, so you can just go ahead and move on from there. Again, I'm not putting my total over $5,000, so it's not going to go to the CFO, but for the CFO task, it's another approval, so you can choose either to show the task in forms, or you can show direct approval for that step. So that means either replying to the email from forms that's going to show up for your CFO, or you can just automatically approve from the task list. Since our order wasn't over $5,000, we should now be able to find that created purchase order in the repository. And it will be under the accounts payable folder in Laser repository. So here, you can show that the information that we've just filled out is in our purchase orders folder, and it's sorted by vendor. So you will want to remember where indeed you placed that purchase order. And you should be able to show that what we filled out was actually put into a common format. So this is where we're using Laserfiche to fill out the purchase order template and make sure that we can send it to someone with the right formatting. At this point, there's also an email task. There's also an email that goes out. So we've also automated a lot of that sending purchase orders out to our vendors. So the PDF is also accessible here if you don't want to go into the repository. And that basically brings us to the end of our purchase order process. And so we've seen that our employee kicks it off by filling out the form, gets routed through several approvals, and at the end of it, gets that information placed into that purchase order form and is ready to be sent to our vendor. Great, so we finished that half. Our next part of the accounts payable demo is actually invoice processing. And like I mentioned earlier, there are 3 different ways that you can go about showing this. And the first is that we can use Quickfield. So if you want to show off some of our batch scanning capabilities, or if it's important to bring paper documents in and grab some of that information to be saved in Laserfiche, you may want to use this route. So we have the Quickfields option. Next, we can also import invoices using Import Agent. So instead of batch scanning, we can show how people can dump their files into a network folder and have Laserfiche bring them in. And the last option is a little bit different. It's using forms to actually upload that invoice and provide some of the information electronically. So this is really something that can be used to make sure that all of our information is electronic from the very beginning of our process to the end of it. So instead of dealing with these scanned-in documents, we'll be able to generate all of that information electronically from the get-go, so there's no paper involved in that process. Let's go ahead and get started with the Quickfields option. And to do that, we're just going to open Quickfields, and we'll be using the invoices session that's already configured. And when we scan these documents in, they're going to be missing a little bit of information. So for one of them, we are going to have to actually either enter the purchase order number here for Logic Corporation in order for the supplier to show up, or you can leave that blank and have the repository data verification step catch that for you. But here, our purchase order is as so, and it's a lookup for the supplier. So it is up to you whether you want to put that in already or not. Our invoice number is also going to come from the document itself, and this is a good way to show how we can quickly fill in identifying information for our documents in Quickfields, and sometimes they're not going to be the same format, so we can't always grab them easily. Oops. And so we're grabbing the invoice number for each of these by just dragging the box and dragging the number into the template fields. With that, we're done with Quickfields and you can store them. And this does kick off the actual processing that's done by workflow. So if you wanted to show the import agent version of bringing documents to Laserfiche instead, what you would do is, instead of doing the Quickfields part that we've just shown, go to our documents, and in here you'll see the Uploads folder. And we'll go to Accounts Payable, and instead of scanning them in through Quickfields, what you would do is grab these two and throw them into the Import Agent folder to show how we can bring those documents in without even having to touch Laserfiche. Import Agent folder will throw them into the right place and make sure they're filed correctly. So that's an alternative to the Quickfields class or document class that we just showed. By doing that, that would bring you to the same step where we are now, which is that workflow is going to do the invoice processing for us and start guiding us through some of the business processes and tasks that need to happen. So we do have a couple emails here for our different invoices. One of them is going to need correction, and the other one from Mobile Enterprises is just going to be correctly shown. So here on these emails, you can see that we have a attachment, a shortcut to the actual Laserfiche entry in the desktop client, or you can also use web access by clicking the link. So that's really up to you how you want to open it up. But the email does have both options. You can see in this email that there's one that requires data correction, so this is a good way to show that workflow can catch some of those inconsistencies and make sure that all the correct information is grabbed. I'm going to open up these invoices in web access, and what we're going to do is just walk you through one of these business processes and what this looks like when you're showing it off. So here we can see all of our different information is applied. And what you really want to show here, especially in web access in the metadata pane, is that the business process is off to the side as well. So all of this information is centralized for us here, and it tells you what to do for the current step. So you can refer to that as you're doing the demo if you need a little reminder of what this next step is. But for the data validation step, you do have to go in and change some of their fields. So we'll just do waiting approval and save it. We can also return to the folders and take a look at what it's set up as. In the Laser repository, not the right folder, but in Accounts Payable, when we look at our invoices, they're arranged in a work queue. So what this means is that as our documents move through each approval step that we're filling out according to the workflow business processes in the panes, they're going to move from folder to folder until they're finally processed and end up in the by vendor folder. So as you're moving those statuses in the fields for what needs to happen next to these invoices, just remember that there's a corresponding folder for those. So if you've moved your document to awaiting approval, they should now be in awaiting approval. And then when we look at our business process for one of these, we can see that we next have to approve the invoice and then finally mark it as paid. So you can either do these two as the same step to save some time, or you can show the piecemeal progression of the invoice through the different steps. So here, just going to change the invoice to approved. That'll move it. If we go back to our folder structure, we'll see it's awaiting payment now, and you can mark it as paid. And that does bring you to the end of the invoice processing process. And at this point, you can also show records management inside the client, since all the things we've been working with are shortcuts, and the actual records themselves are maintained and put with the correct retention schedules at the very beginning of the process. So to show records management, you would sign into the repository as Ralph Records. And you'll see the different views and be able to also show off how you can set those retention schedules on those documents from the very get-go. So here with our invoices, we can see an example of the things we've just filed with the retention schedule in the columns, and you can also show off the records management view of web access if that's also something they're interested in. Okay, so we just went really quickly through how you can either use Quickfield or Import Agent to bring your documents into Laserfiche and then have workflow guide users through the approval process so that those documents are moving through our work queue and end up sorted by vendor in the accounts payable folder. We're also right now looking at records management for this piece. So all the documents we work with are a part of this record, and we're going to be able to see the retention schedules for each of these documents and also sort documents by their disposition timelines, whether they're eligible for disposition or for cutoff. Okay, so we've looked at those two options, and now let's talk about the forms piece for invoice processing. And this one, as I mentioned, is slightly different, but it's also a good way to show bringing in information to Laserfiche from a form without having to deal with any paper at all or even scanning. So for our forms piece, I'm going to clear out some of our tabs. And we're going to go to another link that I've already saved for invoice submission. So this link brings us to the start of our invoice processing process through forms. So this is the first thing you'll start out with if you're using forms to do this. So our widget tech ID, when you enter it, you'll be able to see the rest of the form, and those supplier name fields are going to be populated through a lookup. When we fill out this information, it's going to match our uploaded invoice to some of the information that we have in our repository already for a purchase order. I'm just going to fill out our form pretty quickly. And I'm getting this information from the actual file that we've uploaded here, so you may want to take a look at that before entering all the line items, just so you make sure what you enter is consistent. So with all of that, when you submit it, what we're actually going to be doing is, first of all, checking to see if it matches what we expect, and then routing that invoice through forms to our different users to go through approval. So at this point, if you hadn't entered the right information, we would be getting a task for data correction. So that's also something that's built into this demo. But if you enter everything correctly the first time, you should be going through the approval process. And so we've got our task here that we've opened from the forms inbox, but we also do have invoice notifications from workflow as well here. So they go kind of along the same line as the invoices that were scanned in through Quickfield or Import Agent, but we're just using our tasks and forms to make it look a little bit more organized in terms of routing our tasks to different people. So that's something you may want to mention. That's great about the forms inbox, so people can have a list of centralized tasks for them every day, and that might be a more convenient way to assign things to people. You can just approve the invoice approval, and that moves us on to sending the payment. So this, again, is also kind of like a step in the business process through workflow, but instead here, we're just going to verify that we have sent the payment off, and that allows us to round out the invoice processing in forms instead of changing the field status in the client or web access. And that is the end of our invoice processing through forms. And we should also have some emails just like the other process. You can see here, when we mark our invoices as paid, we do send an email to the vendor notifying them that the payment is on the way. So we have a lot of automated notifications that make it easy to demonstrate how you can keep everyone in the loop throughout this entire process. If you wanted to show records management at this point, it would be a very similar thing. It would be in the same folder that we looked at earlier. So that brings us to the end of all of our different options for running the invoice processing demo. And so we took a look at how we can use Quickfield or Import Agent to bring those electronic files into Laserfiche, one of them with batch scanning and the other dumping them into a network folder. When those steps are completed, then workflow processes our invoice, and you can show some email notifications and also business processes letting us know what the next step is. So that's a good way to show the steps being displayed on the side pane and guiding a user through what they need to do next for the document to move on through the process. Or we can use a forms piece to demonstrate how you can collect information from outside parties, such as your vendor, to have them upload the invoice there so that none of this needs to actually be moderated by someone who's seeing what documents come into Laserfiche. And by using that information to notify different users to approve and send payments for those invoices, we have that centralized task inbox that makes it easy for users to know what's happening and what they need to do as well. That's the end of the AP demo, and good luck with your accounts payable demonstrations.